Can you hear me? Okay, cool. So yeah, so hopefully you saw maybe for the first time things that I saw that day that I wasn't anticipating seeing. Well, hello, welcome. I am your host, Robert Morse. So you got someone coming in. All right. So hopefully from that brief video, you saw some things for the first time that I saw the day of. I saw the blood on the ground. I saw people getting shot at. I saw old ladies getting bashed in the face with shields, completely unprovoked by police officers. I saw it all, and that's what essentially provoked us, especially within the veteran community, to act. But I'll get back to that in a second. I'll want to introduce myself to you guys so you know who's in front of you. My name is Robert Abraham Morse. I am from Reno, Nevada, and I moved from Reno, Nevada at the age of 17 to join the Army. I initially wanted to be a part of the 173rd Airborne, but God had different plans. I ended up becoming a Ranger in 2nd Ranger Battalion, going on 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan and serving my country honorably. But it was on my first deployment to Afghanistan that I knew that I would have more of an impact in the world and with my life as a teacher as opposed to a soldier. I saw the bombed out and destroyed locations of Sharana, Afghanistan. And the people there had no understanding or even concept of what individual sovereignty or, unalienable rights are or could be utilized. They've known nothing but war and tyranny for the last 2,000 plus years. And I knew that that would follow me home, the devastation and the ignorance, unless the next generation knew how to keep this republic. So I dedicated my entire adult life to becoming a high school history teacher at that moment, and knew that I was going to use the GI Bill that I would obtain after having served my country honorably to become a teacher. So that's what I did. In 2015, my contract with the Army ended, and I went to Penn State and got my degree in secondary education. I got a bachelor's degree in the science of education with a minor in political science and a minor in history. So that was pretty cool. And then 2 weeks later, I'm at the Capitol. So life was happening fast. During my senior years when they stole the election, they had the summer of love, in 2020, every city got burned to the ground. And in the midst of a pandemic where they told people that own small businesses that you can't go outside, you can't join what's going on. But if you're pro Black Lives Matter, if you're pro LGBTQ plus, whatever it is, feel free to grab a conveniently placed brick off of your local pallet and smash it through a window and light something on fire. And as a matter of fact, you can take this to the bank and research it all day long to use it against, the enemies of our republic. NPR had to admit that the demographic that suffered the most through the BLM riots of 2020 were Black-owned small businesses. They had no choice but to admit that. So the very demographic that Black Lives Matter claimed to support, those are the ones that suffer the most. Anyways, I showed up to the Capitol because I know that they stole the election. I watched those numbers swap at 3 o'clock in the morning like everybody else did in Pennsylvania. I knew what that was. I knew that they were stealing it. And it's crazy if you think about it, how some people just turned a blind eye to it and some folks knew what was happening. And I think that was my first real indicator that this wasn't just a physical struggle for power in politics. This was actually the beginning of a spiritual war that I don't think has been concluded yet, but it's a tug of war of spiritual proportions that we are all now involved in. As we're all believers in this room, we can attest to that on a personal level and also on a national and perhaps global level. So it's kind of crazy what's going on here. But anyways, at January 6th, and I saw what you guys just saw. I wore the same uniform that I deployed to Afghanistan with on 3 combat deployments to show that I have already invested sweat and blood equity into this country, into the faith. And so if you're going to steal the election, that's a huge problem. So I felt personally inclined to do something about that. And as a matter of fact, the oath that I took when I joined the Army, it says that I'm supposed to protect the Constitution from enemies, both foreign and domestic. And so that was the issue, that I knew that we had domestic enemies trying to tear our Constitution apart. And if they're going to steal our election, then what else are they going to do? Because if you can steal an election, you can do anything. So that was the struggle that we had at that point in time. Now, when I went to the Capitol, I didn't know that a good portion, probably 2/3 of my family would betray me or abandon me. I didn't know that the woman that I had been dating for a year would leave within 2 months of my arrest. And I didn't know that my parents of 31 years were going to get divorced. I didn't know that I was going to lose my home and my assets and everything like that. Everything was taken from me other than my faith in Christ. And I'm here to say that that is the only thing that really got me through, was my belief in Jesus and the fact that I can now, to a degree, relate with some of the individuals that are cataloged within the Old and the New Testament. So that's kind of a cool story. But when I got to the Capitol, I just wanted to use my First Amendment right. I'm not a terrorist for that. And if any of you either wanted to go or were there, that doesn't make you a terrorist either. And the only person or entity that would call you a terrorist for trying to utilize your First Amendment right is a domestic enemy. Only our nation's enemies would have that kind of attitude. Only our nation's enemies would be that anti-republic and that anti-God. Because our rights don't come from men, they come from God. So if you meet someone who's telling you you can't own a gun, you can't worship God the way you want, you need to have your home searched without a warrant, they're not just anti-republic, they're anti-God, as far as I'm concerned. So that's how that works. That's the math that works in my head. So I was arrested on June 11th, 2021, and the FBI admitted in their evidence that I finally got a year and a half into my incarceration, which is 100% illegal, that they waited until the last day of school, because I was a teacher at the time, like I said. They waited until the last day of the school year to arrest me because they knew it was going to hurt me more. That's all they cared about. And it was only after my arrest was I considered a threat to society, a flight risk, even though for the last spring semester I was around minors, even though throughout the last spring semester I was flying from Pittsburgh to Reno, Nevada, from Reno, Nevada to Utah, then Utah back. It was only after my arrest that I have these labels. They knew who I was the entire time. They knew where I was. And so the FBI 100% cannot be trusted in this country. And as a matter of fact, I'm of the opinion, especially after this whole Epstein garbage that's going on right now, though Trump's in the White House, I think we are still an occupied nation. We got the pardon, that's cool, but I kind of feel as though that this must be what the French felt like in World War II when the Germans were occupying their country. So we're occupied as a nation, and we will remain occupied until the body of Americans that have some fight left in them decide not to be occupied anymore. Because as crazy as Kanye West is, he did say something that I kind of do agree with. Slavery is a choice. We choose to be enslaved. We choose to be enslaved by sin. We also choose to be enslaved by tyrants. And though slavery might be initially comfortable, it always leads to hell. And that's what Jesus challenges us to do, to choose a better life, to follow him, willingly undertake sacrifice to be a better version of ourselves and leave the nation better than we found it for the next generation. So that was my whole point in being a teacher, to leave it better than I found it. And the government used it against me at my sentencing speech. Not only did they say that I was a weapon and that the government who trained me to have the skills that I had, I was now using against the government, like some kind of like rogue asset like Jason Bourne. They also made the statement that I was in the classroom creating domestic terrorists. And the judge nods on to that libel without any hesitation whatsoever, which isn't true, obviously. I'm teaching kids to think for themselves, critical thinking, and to acknowledge that the only person that can give up their rights is themselves, but they don't even know what rights they're born with. So they hated me for the fact that I'm a ranger. They hated me for the fact that I'm a teacher. And they hated me for the fact that I love this country and I'm unapologetic with my love and devotion for it. So I'm their enemy. Now, like I said, the only people that would have that attitude are people that want to watch this nation burn. It makes absolutely no sense for me to have as much love in my country that I do to piss people off with it. Because if this is my home, then we should all be on the same page. Otherwise, what are people doing here that want to watch the American flag go up in flames? Unless that really is their goal. So if we can get serious about the fact that there's individuals in this country right now that hate the fact that you're not walking around without like some kind of burqa on, or hate the fact that you can own a firearm and actually take a stand for that regardless of your age, I think we're going to have a rude awakening very soon. Trump's victory was something that we can celebrate about, but it's not a reason to kick your feet up on the lazy boy for whatsoever. So some of you might know that I have the moniker Lego Man. Raise your hand here if you knew that already. Okay, a couple of you guys? All right. So this is ridiculous. Yes, if you go online right now, you type in my name, and then you type in Lego Man right after that, you're going to see a lot of stupid memes of police officers breaking into homes saying that we know you have Legos in there. So this is what happened. On the day of my arrest, the FBI starts to ransack my apartment and go through all my belongings. I didn't have a big apartment, but I had a storage area where there were some Legos sitting around. And I unashamedly love Legos. I think that they awaken the engineer in all of us. I played with them as a kid, and I will do to this day. But while the police officer, the FBI was in my apartment, they act as if they find the holy grail of January 6th because they stumble upon a model kit, a Lego model kit of the United States Capitol. So it was like the worst Seinfeld episode you'd ever seen in your life. They walk into here thinking, I'm at January 6th, storming the Capitol. What do you know? There's a Lego set of the Capitol. And they run with the idea that maybe I'm responsible for the entire thing. Yeah, so they actually push this. They put it in my court documents. They call me the architect of the insurrection, and that me and my Lego set and maybe Trump and Rudy Giuliani sat around in my basement and planned January 6th together with my Legos. What is going on here? Yeah, so they were serious about this. And the FBI, those clowns, they pushed this, and probably the one and only time a judge ever said anything that made sense in my entire 3.5 years of enslavement, when this evidence was brought to his attention, he asks, how is this possible if the Legos are still in the box? It was an unopened box of Legos. So I'm either a Jedi master that can assemble Legos with the power of my mind inside of a box and then plan an insurrection for millions of people to participate in a box of Legos that wasn't opened, or the FBI is full of baloney. So your choice. But yeah, so that's how I get the moniker Lego Man. And it's funny because, it's a shred of humor that came out of this, but I'm not letting it go because it's an example of how far this government, this twisted, shameless government, will go to make you buy a narrative. And it's crazy to me how many Americans will just accept a lie, hook, line, and sinker, not think twice about it, and run off like half my family, like half my friends, and say, yep, that's a terrorist. What? You've known me all your life. My father doesn't speak to me anymore. My brother has disowned me. These people that love America, that used to believe in the same principles and ideals that I do, they're done for. They have written me off as some kind of threat to democracy. Meanwhile, they're the ones that are championing socialism in the streets. It's very bizarre. But I love the fact that we open up with Proverbs because it really does boil down to the way that you codify wisdom in your mind. There's only one wisdom, there's only one truth. But because the devil is the chief of liars, he'll twist a little bit of that wisdom here and there so that it sounds good. A platitude that rolls off the tongue, like Obama is a professional at doing, will rope you in and make you think, yeah, we are the good guys. Killing babies is okay. Taking away people's rights is okay. But then again, once you come back to the word, which is Christ's DNA, as far as I'm concerned, you start to realize this is the reason why we're here. This is the reason why this actual fight is on our hands, is because some of us actually believe that the Bible is part of the way, the truth, and the life, and the other people think it's some guidelines, some moral railings that maybe you probably shouldn't steal, but if you don't like the person, it's okay. That's what the Quran's for. That's what the Talmud is for. What's over there is the only way to heaven, as far as I'm concerned, and that's why it's coming down on us in the pre-kinetic time period that we're in, as far as our republic is concerned. So one thing I do want to mention, as far as like the whole footage that you just saw, is I argue that whoever did plan this out, they didn't use Legos, first of all. Whoever did plan this out knew that a lot of veterans would be present. And how do we activate the existing PTSD of the veterans that are within the community? They knew that there were going to be Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans there. They knew that there was going to be Vietnam veterans there. They knew that there's going to be men and women who have already served this country within the crowd, because the vast majority of veteran community always vote Republican. No wonder, because Republican values align more with the biblical principles than the Democrat Party. Clearly, that's the case, blatantly obvious today. So one of the things that I think they deliberately did was utilize tear gas and CS gas, if you will, to agitate the crowd. And I can personally attest that in my infantry and ranger training, I was deliberately exposed to these things. I have been in a gas chamber on multiple occasions. I have felt the irritation within my esophagus and my lungs from the inside out, choking me and eliciting, a response that's like chemically just unnerving. And in addition to that too, we were vaccinated before deployment to some of these parts of the world in order to help us survive like an anthrax bomb and things like this. So a large majority of the veteran crowd has a deep sensitivity to the chemical irritants that they deployed on the crowd on January 6th. So on a subconscious level, and like in the reptilian mind level of every veteran that was there, we weren't just activated because the violence, the screams, and the smoke and everything else. We were actually chemically activated because of the chemical irritants that they were using that day. So, and with that being said, there was a good majority of the people that were incarcerated for January 6th that were part of either the first responder community, former police officer community, or the veteran community. So it was all stacked against us. And I don't say that to try to defend the individual actions of people that day. But what I will say is that we were walking into a lobster trap without even knowing it. Not just a physical one, but a spiritual one, a chemical one on top of it all. So that's something that I wanted to highlight for you guys. A couple things that I wanted to address here that you can walk away and get into verbal debates about tonight, if need be. And I'll answer questions at the end, but so keep it in mind or write it down, because I'd love to have a Q&A when this is over with. No police officers were killed on January 6th. None. You can look up any police officer that has died in any kind of connection to January 6th. Their gravestone will not say January 6th, 2021. And as a matter of fact, the fifth and final police officer that did die, which I don't think he died, I think he was murdered, he passed in July of 2021. So tell me how that makes sense when you've got people like Joe Biden and everybody else within the Democrat Party that's going to stand on gravestones, which shouldn't shock us because they're willing to promote, mass killing of babies and the severing of genitals off of minors to try to push a lie. If 5 police officers were killed that day, none were. But 4 patriots were killed that day. Most of you guys might know about Ashley Babbitt. Raise your hand if you know her name. Okay, good. The majority of this room. Keep your hand raised if you know who Roseanne Boylan is. Okay? Roseanne Boylan, you actually watched her die in that video. You didn't know it. But she was actually beaten to death by Officer Leila Morris on the steps of the Capitol. Leila Morris was then rewarded for her murder by getting front row seat tickets to the Super Bowl that year. Can you believe that? So if they're going to reward murderers in the doctor's office at Planned Parenthood, what makes you think they're not going to reward murderers on January 6th? That's exactly what happened. Then there's Benjamin Phillips and Kevin Greason. They were shot with flashbangs. They too died. So there's 4 patriots that were murdered on January 6th. You can look up their names. You can discover how they died. You can watch those videos, and then you can debate these people and do your absolute best to rip them out of the matrix that they have been abducted into. Part of me thinks that maybe 30%, and I'm being generous with that, of the left are genuine good people, people that mean well, and their compassion has been taken advantage of because of the very clever but disguised manipulations of the left. They masquerade as a party of compassion. They masquerade as the party that looks out for the little guy. And maybe at one point in time they used to, but that's not the case anymore. Because as far as I'm concerned, the little guy, the most bullied demographic in America right now is the Black Trump supporter. Okay, those people get hate and hell from all over the place. And where is the left backing them up? It's always the contradiction between we want to help the little guy as long as he's on our team, which is a very Marxist doctrine. But our doctrine says that we're supposed to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked. It doesn't say if they're white or they're black, or if they vote red or blue in our Bible. And again, that's why they hate us, because we always have the moral high ground, even if they claim to have it. Here's another one that's good. So I'm going to take a little minute to promote something here for you guys. Kelly Meggs and I, he's the leader of the Oath Keepers chapter in Florida. When he and I were incarcerated together in FDC Philadelphia, we actually wrote a book together, and we got that book smuggled out of prison. And now that book is available on Amazon. It's called One Question Remains. If you were to go on Amazon right now, you could find it, called One Question Remains. And I highly encourage you guys to buy this book, because it's not just a method of dissecting how January 6th was a lobster trap. It's not just a roadmap back to how they've been planning January 6th since 2016, but it's also a well source of quotes from our founding fathers, biblical defiance found in scripture, and a roadmap to actually how we can make America great again, without a doubt. So that is a tool, but I want to spoil something for you guys that is in the book, so that not only you want to go buy it, but you can actually reference this when you get in fights about what January 6th was after today. Because, I want to be your friend and I want to be nice to you guys, but I got to warn you, once you know the truth, you can't unsee it. And now that you are ambassadors of the truth, you will be tasked to be a representative of it. And that might cost you a friendship or two, which might be necessary, if you ask me. But anything you guys might lose from here on out after trying to advocate for the right things, I guarantee you it's not nearly as much as I've lost. And here I am still standing in my boots. So it's okay. You'll survive. All right. But it's crazy that they even let this in our discovery. But Kelly Meggs and I put in print, in One Question Remains, the timetable of how this day's events took place. So rewind January 6th, 2021, and they're having a joint session of Congress. to see whether or not they're going to certify the election results. While they're debating, and while this is going on, and Ted Cruz says that he's going to challenge the vote, and you have a Congress member from Arizona who does the exact same thing. You can watch the clock on the timestamps of all these videos. These events follow each other like clockwork, like this thing had been practiced. Nancy Pelosi, after hearing that these votes are going to be challenged, okay, that the votes might actually be sent back to the states, she leaves the room. She hands off her gavel. Boom, I'm out. And she's a speaker, so she needs to be there. This vote is going to take place. No, she leaves. Once that gavel is handed off, and you can watch this stuff happen, immediately after that, check this out. A red smoke grenade gets shot up in the air. This thing detonates in a red cloud of smoke. Seconds after she leaves the building. Okay? Then what happens is that after that red smoke grenade goes off, all of the Metropolitan Police, adorned in their riot gear, descend on the crowd and things get violent. Now tell me why that happens in a smooth operation. Why did people need to be agitated? The argument that we make is that the very people that supported Trump were about to be used as a naive battering ram to be the reason why the election certification results would not be certified, so that we can be vilified as a MAGA movement, Trump can go down in history as Hitler, and that this whole operation can look like the coup that they claimed it was. And it was all an optics gig. But you can not only read this in print, and one question remains, but you can go and do your own research, like many of Americans have. She hands off a gavel, red smoke grenade, boom, detonates. Metropolitan Police come down in their armor, and it's game on. So not only did I see this stuff, but I want to take what I have witnessed and put it in your mind too. Because I can only do so much as an individual that lived this. I also recognize that had Trump lost the election, I would have gone down in history without any debate whatsoever as a Nazi. Trump would have gone down in history as Adolf Hitler's brother. The textbooks would have been written that way, and in 60 years, nobody would have fought tooth and nail to try to correct that. We have been given an opportunity to try to fix history, and I cannot do it alone. So after having exposed some of the things to you, I need your help. We in this room, as strange as it sounds, are the future, because these kids are so lost, so brainless, so devoid of the love of Christ, which is by design. They need the people in this room to lead them back to the way, the truth, and the life. And the fact of the matter is, the truth about January 6th has been concealed, not just from our friends of the people on the other side of the aisle, but the entire world. And so if we believe in things like the way, the truth, and the life, we actually have a moral obligation and responsibility to educate people about one of the biggest conspiracy theories since JFK's assassination. We lived it. I survived it, but it doesn't mean that I'll survive it forever. So with that being said, I know that I did survive my incarceration without having to get into a single fight, there were altercations, sure, but I didn't have to spill anybody's blood because of the almighty grace of God, without a doubt. I know for a fact that when I called upon the name of the Lord, whether I was reading the book of Daniel and somehow, some way, an officer shows up and decides to change my room from one place to another, or if I'm in the middle of praying to God, hey, you need to remove this person from my life, or remove this hatred within me because I'm going to fight him and I might kill him for this. And then 1 hour later, he gets taken out. Miracle after miracle, sign after sign. I was not just told, I was shown that God was walking side by side with me. And I know that it wasn't just because I was begging God to show up. It was also because there was a large amount of people that were praying on my behalf. So if you're in this room and you prayed for a January 6er, I want to express my gratitude to you because you helped keep me safe in the lion's den. So thank you guys very much for your prayers in that regard. I knew who Jesus was. I had a good idea of who Jesus was prior to my incarceration, but now I recognize him. Now I talk to him like I talk to a friend. Another book that I can recommend to you guys, I didn't write this, but Beautiful Outlaw is a book by John Eldridge that helps me fall in love with the personality of Christ. Beautiful Outlaw, if you guys are interested in reading this will help you fall in love with Jesus the way that I have, and will give you the strength and the intimacy to want to fight on behalf of him, because you don't fight for strangers, you fight for people you know. And a lot of people, even a lot of Christians, consider Jesus a stranger. He's just an image on the wall, or he's an icon that you pray in the direction of. But you do things for people that you know. That book will help you know who Jesus is, to know his sacrifice, to know his personality, and to know his character like I do. And it was a blessing and a curse. But I realized that the pain that I went through was actually designed to make me a better man. This is why Paul talks about how, we're to glory in our sufferings, because these produce perseverance and character and patience. And believe me, I waited a long time for my deliverance, but it did come, which is the craziest thing about it all. So glory be to God, because there's absolutely no way I would have survived had it not been for God's presence in my life. And if you ever doubt God's presence in yours, I can tell you right now, think about me today standing before you, my voice in your ears, because I am living proof that if you really do call upon the Lord with all your might, he does show up. Okay, so I don't know what you're going through now. I don't know who is hurting or is dying in your life, but I can tell you that God isn't ignoring you. He's actually waiting for you to trust him like I was forced to trust him because of my confines. So there is hope, there is an after, and it will be okay. And that's how I believe this country. We're going to make it. It's just going to take men and women like the witch that's in this room to put their money where their mouth is, to stand on their boots instead of kicking back on a lazy boy. And that's ultimately how we end up saving this republic, is through action that is inspired by biblical defiance. One of my favorite parts in the Bible, as far as biblical defiance goes, is in Daniel chapter 3, verses 16 through 18, where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are about to be thrown into the fiery furnace, because they're not going to bow down to the golden idol that Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And I love this. They say, we don't have to defend ourselves to you in this manner, O King Nebuchadnezzar, because we're not going to bow down to your idol. And if you decide to throw us into this fiery furnace, our God will rescue us from this furnace. And then my favorite part goes, but even if our God doesn't rescue us from this fiery furnace, we still won't bow down to your golden idols. And if we all had that mentality, if we all had that attitude, which is biblical, we're defying tyranny, we're defying government, we're defying an authority that is not in line with our biblical principles, we will be blessed. And there will be another in the fire. I guarantee that, because I'm living proof to you guys that there was one in the fire for me. And if it happened for me, it can happen for you. So I got two cute stories for you guys, essentially because I have all this time now. I can just tell you what happened every single day of my incarceration. But I got two cute stories for you guys because it wasn't, endless misery the entire time I was incarcerated. There were good moments. There were windows of positivity and happiness that passed me by as I was, sojourning through the underworld, if you will. In, I want to say July, maybe it was August of 2021, I started to notice that there were a lot of people talking about suicide. And they weren't joking about it. They were actually going to kill themselves. Imagine this. Everything Everything that you've ever known and loved has now been used against you. Your family has broken. Your wife or your kids have completely walked away from you or have betrayed you, sold you out. Your assets are gone. In addition to the fact that the entire weight of the federal government is now breathing down your neck, telling you that you're looking at 50 to 100 years. You're not getting out of this box. And everything that you thought was righteous, something to stand for, nah, actually, that's going to be the reason why you die. And you have the enemy of your souls mocking you and laughing at you the entire time. So the weight that we were under in this building was astronomical, and it's very difficult to imagine. And I would hope that you guys never have to endure something to that effect, but it was gruesome. It was the most brutal experience I think I've ever gone through, and I hope I don't have to go through something like that again, but who knows? Well, a lot of these individuals were running out of hope. And I contacted a friend of mine who was in the cell block with me. His name is Jeff Sable. He's another January 6er. Love the guy, a little older than me, a little shorter than me too, but he and I got along great. Let's see what's going on here. Come on in. Huh. Yeah. So Jeff Sable and I get together, and he's a little bit of a bleeding heart like I am. He wears his heart on his sleeve too. And we got to talk, and we're like, man, these people really are going to start killing themselves if we don't do something about this. And frankly, I wouldn't blame them. Granted, I think suicide is a coward's way out, but dude, under those circumstances, man, you got to imagine, we were really going through it. But then again, there's always another option. So Jeff Sable and I got together, and I'm like, dude, I have an idea. This is how we're going to try to fix what's going on in this building. I came up with the idea of putting together comedy/talent shows to uplift the morale within the room. Just like our POW ancestors in Vietnam, they had their little comedy talent shows, and they, encouraged levity amongst the core. That's exactly what we decided to do. And because we were so bereft of hope, I decided to coin these comedy and talent shows opium dens. So I invited everyone to come to the opium den. We got a whole bunch of chairs set up, and we convinced the guards to let everybody out all at the same time, because we were in solitary confinement at that point in time. But with enough greasing of the wheels, the officer said, okay, yeah, we'll let everybody out. So I drew a little image. I got everybody together. I got about 10 acts put together for this comedy show, talent show. And at first it sounds really silly, but because of the monotony and how treacherous our lives were, man, people were willing to essentially do anything to kind of distract themselves. So it gathered the whole crowd. And I knew from my time in the Army that you can't ask someone else to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. So I decided to be the first act of the opium den to break the ice, let everybody know that it is okay to be silly in front of 80 other men that you don't know from Adam in the middle of hell. And I'm not the greatest singer in the world, but I put a costume together, and in front of these 80 men, with crowd participation, I will say, I sang the song, I'll Make a Man Out of You from the Mulan cartoon. Anybody know what that is? Yeah. So not only did I sing this, but during the song, when the crowd says, be a man, I had little posters that I had made on the catwalk that I'd point to, and the rest of the crowd would say it back to me. We had an echo thing going on. It was really cool. Well, anyways, the plan worked. The opium dens were a success. And the 9 acts that followed really lit the place on fire. And for about an hour, people relaxed, people laughed, people were crying with how much laughter that was coming out of them. I learned that day that laughter is where God is. God is in the laughter. And it was crazy. After the show was over with, it was like there was a vapor of positivity that you would walk through. When a cloud sets low on the ground and you kind of have to walk through and you can actually feel the water droplets on your face, that's exactly what it felt like in the prison pod where you could feel the presence of God. It was very beautiful. And everybody slept great that night. And there was peace in the realm. So we achieved that. So that's a good story. That's the hopium dens. And while I was there in 2021, I made sure that we had 4 hopium dens. It was a lot of fun. And this is another story that I can actually spoil for you guys because I'm working on a second book right now. When you read One Question Remains, you'll find that I only give myself 3 paragraphs about my own testimony. Kelly Meigs and I actually wrote that more of as like an investigative journalist would about the day of January 6th, instead of our own personal testimony. So the second book that's about to come out soon is actually just 41 stories about time behind bars. And I would say 2/3 of them are going to make you roll on the floor laughing. And this is one of them. And it also requires the context of the hopium den so you guys understand why these things went down at all. So here we are trying to survive, and we get word that Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to come visit us. You guys remember that when she came, to the DC jail? So cool, dude. I got to shake her hand and everything. That was wild. But the reason why I want to bring this up is because when we got word that she was coming in, some people prepared themselves to look as professional as you could. They found their cleanest oranges. They washed their face. They combed their hair. Other people decided, no, I'm going to look as ravaged as possible. He knows that I'm having a terrible time. And everybody prepared according to their character. Just will say that. But when she did arrive, there was one person who had a really hard time preparing for a visit from Congresswoman. And that was a friend of mine named Brandon Fellows. Now, he's not going to mind me telling this story because, that guy kind of does like attention, and he'll admit it to you. But he had a hard time preparing for this visit from Marjorie Taylor Greene because of something that happened a couple days prior. For Halloween in 2021, we really did it up. We did everything that we could to try to enjoy the holiday for what it was. We had a costume contest. We did trick-or-treating. Everybody went and bought a different type of candy from commissary. And, it was silly. And I know that it sounds silly, but we needed anything really to distract us from where we were. And so, again, we convinced the guard to give us the opportunity to go from cell to cell and pretend to trick-or-treat. And we goofed off. And it was what it was. And in addition to that, too, one of the guys turned his whole cell into a haunted house. I don't know how that happened, but it was pretty wild. So again, we were desperate, but we were trying to make wholesome fun out of the day. But so for the costume contest, plenty of guys, did their thing, dressed up as characters from movies. Another guy dressed up as like the character from Little Caesars, like the guy with the pizza on his spear, who looks like a Russian guy. It was kind of funny. But anyways, there was another individual that was locked up with us called Brian Mock. Brian Mock, I think he's from Virginia. He's a bald guy, and nothing against people that are bald, but I think to compensate for his baldness, he had like some pretty big chops that he was very proud of. And he had kind of made a stir within the pod, but that's a story for another time. But anyways, Brandon Fellows decides to dress up as Brian Mock for Halloween. Okay. And to do this, he takes what's known as magic shave. Is anyone familiar with what magic shave is? Okay. Some of us are, some of us aren't. Let me educate you on what magic shave is. Magic shave is a cream that you put on an area of skin that you want to eradicate the hair follicles with and make yourself essentially shaved without the razor. Might lead to cancer, might lead to baldness. This guy, Brandon Fellows, decides to empty an entire bottle of magic shave on his head so that he can be just as bald as Brian Mock. Okay? But here's the catch. To, troll Brian Mock a little bit, for context, Brandon Fellows cannot grow a beard. He can barely grow sideburns. So what he did do was leave his sideburns like little catfish whiskers on the end of his head here, okay? Took everything off, had his little catfish whisker sideburns, and dressed up as Brian Mock for Halloween, okay? Not only did he impress us, He won the costume contest because of his commitment level. We're like, wow, dude, you went bald for the costume contest. That's nuts. Like you didn't have to do that, you know? So he does this, cool. He wins the costume contest, but a couple days later, Marjorie Taylor Greene's showing up. And we have been slayed in the media for being whack jobs and crazy people and everything like this. And so when a congresswoman is coming to visit us in jail and everyone's getting ready and trying to look their best and whatever, I look over at Brandon Fellows. He looks like a white bald catfish. I'm looking at him like, dude, what are you going to do? Well, how are you going to fix this? And he, you know, I love Brandon because I don't know what you want me to do. I don't know what you want me to do. I'm like, man, just maybe get rid of the sideburns. You know, maybe start there. Just get rid of everything. Okay, you're bald. Just run with that. No, he decides to take his little catfish whiskers and to just put them behind his ears. That's how he was going to fix himself. So now he has these little catfish whiskers that are bowed out to here, looking like an absolute creep. And so when Marjorie Taylor Greene walks into this place, she looks at him and just looks down, man. But I saw that interaction, I'm like, oh no, dude, she's going to think we are nuts. Like, the rumors are true, you know? I love Brandon, and if he ever hears this, I love you, bro. But that was another good story, you know, where I'll never forget that. I'll probably tell my kids about that story because, you know, it's there's a couple things to take from that. One, we were doing our best to survive, and we bonded. We did everything we could to overcome the obstacles that we had. But then here's something else to consider too. Just because you think you're going to get a laughter of a crowd doesn't make what you're about to do okay, especially when the show is over. Always think about that. Just because the curtain's closed doesn't mean that people are done looking at you. And so that's essentially the faux pas that Brandon Fellows committed. Was after the show was over, now he's looking like a catfish in front of someone who's duly elected to Congress. So that was a good story. And I wanted to share that with you guys because it wasn't just miserable. I knew from the beginning that I was locked inside of a redemption chamber. I knew that I was on the hero's journey. And I don't know if there are any Joseph Campbell fans out there, but I've read his book, Power of Myth, and I've read his book, Hero of a Thousand Faces. And he talks about how the hero's journey can begin in one of two ways. Either the hero volunteers for it, which is what Jesus Christ did on his hero's journey when he decided to take upon all of our sins on the cross, or the hero gets abducted into the hero's journey. He gets sucked into it. A tentacle or a riptide will essentially lure this hero into the underworld. And I think the latter event is what took place in order for my hero's journey to begin. However, I was painfully aware that the hero's journey had begun, and I would conduct myself accordingly. So with that being said, I was aware that when people bothered me, or I was being tested, or my inadequacies were coming up to the surface, this wasn't happening to me. It was actually happening for me. I was able to embrace the exposure, embrace the frustration, and I was able to embrace the fact that this wasn't just happening to destroy me and turn me into dust. This was actually taking place so that I could be refined and stronger than ever. I'm a better person now because of it, but it's because how I pivoted and how I rotated it and how I reacted through God's grace and his example that I'm able to stand here before you guys without regrets. My honor is intact. I don't have shame, and I can enter the house of my Father without shame. So I want to encourage you guys that as you go through something that you feel as though is your hero's journey, one, you'll probably know because it's going to feel strange. But we're also encouraged in the Bible not to feel as though something strange is happening to you, but it's actually happened to come test you. The Bible is your guide through your hero's journey. There's also going to be people that randomly want to come help you over and over and over again. And this is from, Joseph Campbell's evaluation that the hero's journey is a unanimous story that is told in every corner of the globe, regardless if you're in some kind of random island tribe or in some palace. There are some components of the hero's journey that do take place. You are intimately tested on every single level that is personal to you. Your name will be evaluated, who your parents are, the impact that they had on you, and the way you live your life will be brought to the surface and evaluated. In addition to that, there's going to be a fairy godmother. There's going to be some kind of mistress or some kind of maiden or some kind of ambassador from the surface world that shows up to try to offer you a kind word or a donation or some kind of help along the way. And then in addition to that too, whatever you find in the underworld, whether it's the golden fleece or the Nordic runes or the chalice or whatever it is, that's actually designed to be taken from the underworld and brought back to the surface to revitalize the community that you left. And that is exactly what happened with me. So while I was incarcerated, it hit me like a truck. God put a story in my head that he wants to be turned into a movie. So I'm in the process of making my own production company right now. Not only have I written a screenplay for a movie that hopefully within the next couple of years you will see in the theaters, but it's a story that was deliberately hidden from everybody, not just in America, but the world over 2,000 years ago, so that one man's defiance of tyranny, his courage, and his bravery would never be repeated by the public. I've tracked this guy down through time. I've read all the papers. I've looked at all the coinage. And I've analyzed who this individual was. I can't say too much more because I am under an NDA for it, but this story is something that I'm going to pursue and hopefully put in not just movie theaters, but also in every single classroom in America. All they had to do was leave me alone, man. Just let me teach in one high school classroom. Now I'm going to be in every single one. That's going to be my response. That's going to be my revenge. You should have left me alone, dude. Now you've made a monster out of me. So now I'm going to be in every single classroom. Now, hopefully, I'm going to be referenced with the work that I've put in not just classrooms, but auditoriums all across the country. Because what I do believe that God has blessed me and my crew with is a story that's going to help save Western civilization. It's going to be a knockout punch of the culture war. It's going to be what young men like this guy here needs to see and hear. To understand that the foundation of this country, the biblical principles, the philosophy of Western thought, not only is what's going to rescue this country, but it's what's under siege. And it's going to be up to this generation here to help fix this. So it's my responsibility as a teacher to teach the next generation what's actually at stake and what you can tap into, which is none other than the strength of the ancestors. For over 2,000 years, people that share our bloodline were willing to fight for the invisible, willing to fight for things like honor. You can't touch honor, but you can see it in the look of someone's eyes when they trust you. People were willing to die for integrity. You can't really feel it. Like you can feel the ocean when you step inside, but you can see it when a woman trusts you and she looks at you with faith. These are things that used to catapult men into violence, not because they had something to prove, because they were inferior and beta males, but because they had something to protect. That has been almost eradicated within Western philosophy, and I'm going to do my best to bring it back. This is something that chivalry was all about. This is something that knights were willing to die on honor's sake right here and now for, with or without their armor. And so this is something that I think January 6th was actually designed to eradicate the fighting spirit of men. I mean, if you think about it, when we celebrate 4th of July, we're not celebrating a deal at Costco. We're celebrating when a couple of crazy wild men, only 1,000 strong, decided to say, you know what? You know that biggest empire the planet's ever seen? Yeah, we're going to pick a fight with that, and we're going to win. That's crazy. They declared independence from the greatest empire the world has ever known. And we're a living result of that. So when we're celebrating things like the 4th of July, we're not celebrating just a cool fireworks show. We're actually trying to remember, but not live out, what it means to be an American. And fighting, literally fighting, if not emotionally and verbally and intellectually, but perhaps physically, is a part of that equation. I mean, if you read 2 Samuel 22, it's nothing but violence. And I think it's actually a counterfeit Christianity to make Christians pacifists. We are supposed to pray and bless our enemies. But we're also told in Timothy that if you can't provide for your family, you're worse than a non-believer. And what better way to provide for your family than to put a defense between chaos and anarchy that's outside your door where the wolves are, and have peace and prosperity in the home that God has blessed you and trusted you with, requires violence and or the capability of. So I reject the notion that, the Christians that fought crusades to keep us from speaking Arabic went to hell. I think that they're in heaven, and I think that those men that were willing to draw a sword or draw a gun so that people that they would never meet, like me, can speak English or worship God as we understand him to be. I think that's the coolest, most incredible thing that any of those men could have done. And I'm sick of listening to people vilify our founding fathers or the crusaders for what they did. I think that everything that they have done in order to keep us safe, regardless of our color, regardless of where we came from, but the American attitude, the Western attitude is not only under attack because our enemies are terrified of what we're capable of once we get our act together, but it's something they know they are centimeters away from wiping out from the face of the earth. So it's up to us, if you think about it, to keep it alive. And that's why, I'm starting a movie that I'm doing. Okay, yeah, last but not least, I got another cool story for you guys that really kind of wraps it all in. We've been talking about God, we've been talking about the Bible and things like this. And we're all aware that God of the Hebrews, Abraham and Isaac and Moses, this is a God that likes to rename people. Okay, he loves doing that after they pass some kind of test. He renames people after they have shown that they are faithful. So, for example, Abram became Abraham after he was willing to sacrifice his son. The one son that he got, even though he was promised, the offspring that would, be bigger than the constellations in the sky, God then tells him to kill his firstborn son. That's crazy. He goes and performs the task. As a result, he gets renamed Abraham, father of many nations. After wrestling all night long, Jacob, who not only screwed over his brother, and his name means trickster, one that bites the heel, after wrestling all night long with the Lord, he was renamed Israel. Though he was punched in the hip so that he would never forget, the pain that he would have forever, the mark that he had, he was also given something else, a new name, so that he would never forget the responsibility that he would have to continue to wrestle with the Lord for the rest of his life. Jacob became Israel. Saul, one of the chief of sinners and the ones who persecuted our religion in the beginning of us when we were hiding for fear of our lives in catacombs and worshiping God amongst the dead, he was proud of the fact that he was hunting us down. He was a Jew, very well educated, had a prosperous background, was brought low, blinded, and then renamed Paul and became the apostle, taking Judas's place after he had been renamed and given another task. So obviously, God likes renaming people. I'm going to share something crazy with you guys. We talked about the Lego Man thing. Now it's a joke and it's funny, Do you guys know what Lego Man means in Latin? I didn't either until a buddy of mine approached me with this. Lego Man in Latin means I assemble men, or I anoint men. That is the name that I have been given after having gone through this gruesome sojourn, after having successfully gone through the hero's journey. My name means that I anoint and assemble men. So that's what I will do. You can't make that up. There are miracles surrounding us constantly. And if we have eyes that can see, we can see them as plain as day, should we choose. That's why we've been given free will, so that we can choose to see God work in our lives. My eyes are open. It brings me to tears sometimes. I can't even sing worship songs out loud anymore because how big of a deal this has become. but we have as much of God in our lives as we want. Think about that. We have as much of God in our lives as we want. And God loves us so much that if we want nothing to do with him in this temporary life in the third dimension, he'll give us what we want, an eternity without him. And that's why hell is there. That's why hell exists. Because if you really don't want to spend eternity with the Creator, cool, he'll send you back. That's his expression of love. How crazy is that? So I have been renamed, and my responsibility is clear. I am going to continue to ask for your prayers. That's why I think that this movie is ordained, and the message that I'm trying to promote is ordained. And I'll spend 5 minutes with this young man, and he's going to be real revved up to see what this thing is, like every other young man I've talked to, in reference to the concept of this movie and what it's about to perform. So I still need your help. I need your help spreading the word. I cannot remove people from the matrix by myself. I need everyone in this room and every room that I engage in from here on out to go out and not just spread the gospel of how Jesus died for our sins, but also the truth about January 6th so that it never happens again. I would like to be the last American political prisoner. But if you guys in this room do nothing, I won't be. I will go back to prison. The dream that I have, the mission that I have, it will not be completed if we sit on our hands. So I want to be the last political prisoner. But if you leave this room and forget everything that I've said, I won't be. It'll be you next. So please prepare yourselves, prepare your minds, prepare your families for hard times. Please go and vote, get activated, become strong. Pray about this stuff. But remember, our God is a warrior God. He's not a God that likes memes. He's not a God that sits around and watches Jeopardy. He's a God that anoints, renames men. He's a God that will help you bring your foes down. And he's a God that will offer you salvation should you seek it. That's powerful. And that's something that you can't forget. So the last thing I wanted to do with you guys, and I'm going to need your help because I need you to bring something up on the TV. There's another story for you guys that I'll share with you. I think this room is ready for it. You mind just pulling up a still image of an American flag? Or maybe a waving one. Let's do a waving one. When I was in the DC Gulag, I got there, I want to say like 2 or 3 weeks after. Oh, you can just collapse that. There you go. Because we're done watching that. About 2 or 3 weeks after I had been initially arrested, I finally get to the DC Gulag, where the Patriot Pod is. And I was brought to tears that at 9 p.m. they sang the national anthem. And I thought, wow, man, that is profound. Defiance of tyranny, singing the national anthem, even though your rights have been obliterated, your country is back on you, all this stuff. That is cool. That's amazing. And so I remember not even really being able to complete the national anthem because tears were flowing down my face and I had a hard time composing myself because of how powerful that was. So about a week goes by and I decided to do something that actually kind of pissed people off. I started to scream in the middle of the national anthem. And we had just lived through the Colin Kaepernick disgrace, where he takes a knee in the middle of the national anthem. He disrespects the thousands of people that have died for those colors to try to make some kind of political statement and interject himself completely inappropriately in something that's sacred to our national heritage. So when I started screaming in the middle of the national anthem, people confronted me and said, dude, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? My response was this. After everything that I had been through, after everything that had been taken from me, after how I have suffered at the hands of my government, my love of country and my trust in my God is still there. So when we sang the national anthem, I would scream the words, still there. And after having explained why I was screaming those two words, and the defiance of tyranny, but also my loyalty to my convictions, and that everything that they were doing to me was not enough to take that from me or break me. I would scream those lyrics still there. And now it's become not just a tradition of January 6ers to do that during the national anthem. It's actually catching on to change the national anthem for good. So I would like to invite you guys to not only sing the national anthem with me, but when the lyrics come around, we're still there to happen, to scream those two words with me, because I know I'm not the only one in this room whose love of country and trust in God is still there after everything that tyranny has put us through. So you guys want to sing the national anthem with me? Let's do it. Let's do it.